One of the biggest mistakes sellers make in the spring market has nothing to do with price. It has to do with misunderstanding the person walking through their front door. Most sellers think every buyer showing up to a visit is the same. They assume everyone is looking for the same thing, negotiating the same way, and moving at the same pace. But that's not how the spring market works. In reality, there are three completely different types of buyers moving through the Montreal market this time of year. Each one behaves differently, each one negotiates differently, and if you don't recognize who you're dealing with, it's very easy to reject the best opportunity you're going to get. I've seen sellers dismiss strong offers because they misunderstood the buyer behind them. I've also seen sellers miss their momentum window because they assumed another buyer would show up. Today, I want to show you how to read the buyers entering your property and how to respond strategically when they do. Hi, I'm Aguinaga, Montreal real estate broker and investor. I've been working in this market for over 17 years, and I can say with confidence that spring is always the busiest season in our market. Buyers are active, listings start appearing every week, and the entire environment feels energetic. Because of that energy, many sellers assume the market will simply deliver the right buyer if they wait long enough. But real estate doesn't work that way. Every showing that happens in your property is a signal. Buyers reveal their intentions in subtle ways. How quickly they visit, the questions they ask, the timing of their offers. When you learn to recognize those signals, the negotiation becomes much clearer. And that's where understanding the buyer behavior becomes powerful. Because not every buyer entering your property is there for the same reason. So let's talk about the different kinds of buyers I have seen. The first type of buyer that appears frequently in spring is what I call the urgent buyer. These are buyers who have already lost one or two properties earlier in the season. They've been watching the market closely, they've seen how competitive certain segments can be, and they're emotionally ready to secure something before another opportunity disappears. You can usually feel their urgency during the showing. They move through the property with focus. They ask practical questions about timelines, inspections, and closing dates. Sometimes they come back for a second visit within a few days. These buyers are not exploring casually. They are actively trying to solve a problem. Maybe they sold their current home and need to relocate quickly. Maybe they've been competing in bidding wars for weeks and don't want to lose another opportunity. Either way, their motivation is real. For sellers, this type of buyer can be incredibly valuable. They tend to move quickly and negotiate seriously. But the mistake some sellers make is assuming urgency automatically means a higher price will appear later. Sometimes the first serious buyer is the one who understands the market the best. They recognize the property's value early and move before competition intensifies. The second type of buyer you'll encounter during spring is the comparison buyer. These buyers are active, but they are also extremely analytical. They visit several properties in the same neighborhood and price band, often within the same weekend. Their goal is to understand the landscape before committing. During showings, comparison buyers ask detailed questions about upgrades, maintenance history, and differences between nearby homes. They're not rushing, they're building context. Many sellers misinterpret this type of buyer as not serious simply because they don't move immediately. But in reality, comparison buyers are often the most informed participants in the market. Once they decide which property offers the strongest value, they can move confidently. If your property is positioned well relative to the competition, these buyers will recognize it, and when they do, their offers tend to be structured carefully because they understand the numbers. The challenge for sellers is patience. Comparison buyers rarely make emotional decisions on the first visit. They evaluate, they return for second showings, and then they act. Recognizing that behavior helps sellers avoid reacting too quickly or dismissing interest that is still developing. The third type of buyer that emerges later in the process is the opportunistic buyer. These buyers operate differently from the first two groups. They monitor the market quietly, watching listings that remain active longer than expected. When a property sits on the market for a few weeks, opportunistic buyers begin paying attention. They assume the seller may have mispriced the property or might now be open to negotiation. You'll notice their approach during visits. They ask fewer emotional questions and more strategic ones. They want to know how long the property has been available, whether other offers have appeared, and how flexible the seller might be. These buyers are not necessarily negative. In fact, many successful investors operate this way. But from a seller's perspective, the presence of opportunistic buyers usually means momentum has already slowed. At that stage, negotiations shift. Instead of competing buyers driving price upwards, the conversation becomes about finding common ground. The key insight here is timing. Early in a listing's life, the majority of visitors tend to be urgent buyers and comparison buyers. These are the people actively searching for a home and willing to move when they see the right opportunity. But as time passes and the listing remains active, the mix of buyers begins to change. Urgent buyers move on to other listings. Comparison buyers make decisions elsewhere. And gradually, opportunistic buyers become the dominant audience. That shift changes the entire negotiation dynamic, which is why momentum is so important in Montreal's market. Capturing serious interest early allows sellers to negotiate with buyers who are motivated to secure a home, not simply looking for leverage. Understanding these buyer profiles helps sellers make clear decisions when offers appear. If a serious buyer emerges early in the process, the question should not automatically be, what if something better comes later? Instead, the more useful question is, what signals is the market giving us right now? Strong early interest is rarely random. It often reflects a buyer who recognizes the property's value before others do. On the other hand, if interest develops gradually over multiple visits, that may indicate comparison buyers are evaluating the home carefully. In that situation, maintaining strong positioning relative to other listings becomes critical. And if activity slows dramatically after several weeks, that's usually a signal that the buyer pool has shifted towards opportunistic negotiations. Recognizing those moments allows sellers to adjust strategy intelligently instead of reacting emotionally. Spring markets move quickly, but they are not chaotic when you understand the behavior behind them. Buyers may appear similar at first glance, but their motivations are very different. Some are ready to act immediately, some are gathering information, and some are waiting for the market to soften. The sellers who succeed are the ones who understand which type of buyer they are dealing with and respond accordingly. Because in real estate, the best negotiations happen when you read the market clearly, not when you guess. If you're preparing to sell this year in Montreal and want to understand how buyers will interact with your property, book a 15-minute listing strategy call. We'll look at your property, your price band, and the type of buyer is most likely to walk through your door. Because when you understand the people entering your home, you can negotiate with confidence. I'm Aguinaga, and I'm here to make sure your next move is a strategic one. Have any questions? Please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.